Is sensory overload creating a PTSD effect that we call autism?
Is autism born out of biology or technology?
Now look over there. Now look over there. Now look over there.
Where? Where? What? Huh?
Enable program deep diving. Loading parent frozen mod. Loading PC roster. Visualizing season 6 of Kitchen Sick Microscopy.
Is this thing on? Okay, everybody. Welcome to Kitchen Sink Microscopy, Season 6, Episode 6, something else 6. Ugh. I am Casey Rochford, your resident metalhead, and we would love it if you would like and share and subscribe to the channel. Please and thank you.
And I am Eric Rosenblatt, as always. And Casey and I, we write our own music. We sometimes collaborate, sometimes independent music that we do. And there will be one of our songs at the end of this episode, or a piece of it at least. So, yeah, check it out. So Casey, what do you want to talk about today?
Well, it's something that's been on my mind for a while. As the spectrum of autism has been growing, I've always had this thought in my mind, like, I, I mean, is it really like a disability, or is it just like another end of the normal spectrum? Like, because normal is also a spectrum. So, like, at
Yeah,
what point do you really draw the line here? Um,
it is a little kind of odd. Yeah, because as far as I'm concerned, I mean, unless you have some kind of really major something or other, right? Like actual brain damage or you're missing an arm or whatever. There's a everybody is a little bit different and has their ups and downs or whatnot, the things that they I don't know, like struggle with or something, and things that they're good at and whatever. Like I I don't know, like mental disabilities that don't have like a direct physical cause always I kind of question that a little bit, that it's like abnormal, because maybe it's
mhm.
like, well, humans are just capable of being this way, right? It's like saying being homosexual is abnormal. Like, well, we people are just born that way, and it's like kind of the way it is. It's not really abnormal. It's just a personal attraction to people, you know.
Right.
Like, this is that abnormal? Like, if you're into like skinny people or heavier set people or people of a certain ethnicity, is that like an aberration or something? Like, not really, just personal taste, really.
Yeah, I mean, like, to in the eye of the beholder, it might be an aberration from what they consider normal or right or wrong, but in reality, in the big picture, um, I don't really see it as I mean, let's be clear. Like, there are, of course, certain aspects of, um, let's say, like a concentrated autism that can make it difficult to uh, participate in everyday society, right?
Yeah.
Um, the quote unquote normal.
Mm.
But I mean, that's like in certain aspects, but in other aspects, that person could be like on the complete flip end of the spectrum when it comes to doing something particular. Like, they're the most talented, or like
Mhm.
the most unique or special or whatever, like to an astounding amount. Like, you
Sure.
know, it tends to be that when you have a lot of weight on one thing, everything else around it tends to wither a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So it could just be that there's like an undiscovered potential, or in some cases, you already know what this particular thing is,
Mm-hmm.
like the savant thing.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, like, who's to say that's not just normal, just a different normal,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. It's just one of the many flavors human beings can come
Mm-hmm.
in essence. Well, and it's like if I could say, when I was growing up, I really could not get in front of a crowd or a group of people and even just read from a piece of paper, let alone like perform. I was absolutely like I was incapable of doing that. Just like I froze.
Mm-hmm.
And but then there's other things that I had no trouble doing. And so it's like, what? Just because I can't get up in front of a crowd as other people can, like, does that mean I have some kind of a disability, or you know, is it just I'm just one of those people that when I was young, that's how I was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've I've never really had an issue with that, but for me, it's like person to person small talk.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I totally freeze up.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh, like
and
having like an emotional conversation one on one, that kind of
no,
thing.
actually, like that's easier. It's the stuff where like I don't really know what to say.
Mm.
Um, it's just the boring humdrum stuff. Like, hey, how's it going? Like
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah,
how
like
about
small talk. Okay.
the Bears? Yeah,
Exactly.
like I'm not so great at that stuff. Like if I can make jokes or talk about a particular topic as we do on this show, then I won't shut up.
Mhm.
Um, but but otherwise, like I completely just totally
If
have no idea what to say, and I'm all quiet.
if there's no like direction of conversation, then
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah, I understand that.
Like I've I've thought for some years now that like I probably fall into that autism spectrum. I've got a handful of characteristics that fit it. Um, Certainly not deep into it to the point where like I can't function in
You know,
all the important ways, let's say.
yeah,
Uh, but having moved to Germany and trying to learn a new language and stuff, I'm seeing an amplification in a lot of the way I communicate without words
Mhm.
and how weird it is to people and off-putting.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
and that just kind of like outlined for me the reality of it. Like, I mean, I don't think of it as a bad thing. It's just something that like I have to be aware of, and I have to make people aware of so that they don't think I'm rude or I'm
Mhm.
pissed at them or whatever.
Well,
Like,
body language is like half of communication, at
mhm.
least, if not more. You know.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I don't call autism a mental illness or a mental defect or damage or anything like that, because you can be aware of it and work on it. Like,
Yeah.
you can't really like fix it, let's say, probably, but with a mental illness, like you've heard the saying, like if you think you're insane, you aren't.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you you wouldn't be self-aware of
Mhm.
that. Um, and that for me is where it sets it apart from like being actually like a disability.
Well, yeah. If it's
I
something
mean,
you
it
can.
can be a disability, but like,
Well, I think just kind of left alone, a lot of things could be disabilities.
oh yeah,
Like if you have some kind of physical thing, right? That maybe I don't know. Well, even somebody that lost a hand or a foot or something like that, or a leg. Like, okay, it may be considered a disability, but you can like work to overcome that to basically operate as if you didn't have that.
yeah.
So it's like, yeah, it's still present. You're missing a leg, but you can walk around, you could drive a car, maybe even run a race, you know? And so
How
it's like
cool!
at that point, it's not.
How cool would it be if the world of pedagogy got to this point where they were like, hey, let's completely restructure how we teach. Starting at like the kindergarten level, that's almost like a funnel system where you learn how each individual kid learns,
Mm-hmm.
and you make notes of that. And rather than making notes of that in a way like your child needs extra tutoring, your child is like a total asshole to other people and stuff like that, like,
Not in a critical way, but more of an
yeah,
observational way.
a constructive observational way and a directional way,
Mm-hmm.
and then have different schools based on teaching styles,
Mm-hmm.
and within those you can have completely different like curriculum
Yeah.
too, like
Yeah.
tailor fit to these learning styles, like some people are math people, some
Yeah.
people are definitely not, and you might as well not like torture them too much with
Yeah.
math, like
Exactly.
so.
Or maybe there's a different way, a different approach of teaching math that
Mhm,
works for some people, but not for others. Uh,
exactly. So
yeah.
and I feel like that's the only real place where we find ourselves lumping autism into the disability category, is like, oh, like this is how we teach and you can't really pass mustard, so I guess you're disabled. But they're
Yeah.
actually probably like super smart.
Well,
So
exactly. You'd never know. I
mhm,
yeah, and I totally agree. I like you said with math and stuff like that. I sucked at math, and I on constantly failed and just struggled trying to wrap my head around it. But what brought me into understanding mathematics and actually really loving it was programming. Like I
mhm,
was making these games and I had to solve problems, and math became the tool for solving these problems. And I had to kind of teach myself that.
right.
And so
And
that was the
well, it's
method
not.
that worked for me.
Yeah, and it's not even just autism that you would be helping with a system like that. It would be
No,
like attention deficit disorder,
you'd be helping
and
everybody.
yeah, like all the types of people would be in their best environment for success.
Mm-hmm.
And
Actually,
like there
speaking,
probably are no stupid people. There's just shitty teachers.
I
Well,
think
like a broken system, let's say it
exactly.
that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. The teachers are working within the confines of what they have available.
Mhm.
Most of them, at least. Um, Speaking of environment, though, this is something that I've been thinking for a long time. Because, like, when I was a kid, I didn't really know anybody that exhibited kind of like overt autistic symptoms, like, or behaviors. Um, Maybe a little, but it wasn't that common. And now it seems like everybody's autistic. Um, like everybody's kid
Mhm.
is autistic or has ADHD and stuff. And like ADHD was kind of, or ADD as it was called when I was, in my middle school, high school time, um,
Mhm.
was kind of emerging. And it was like, what is that? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And my friend was diagnosed with it and they gave him Ritalin, and he was a fidgety kid, but he was super creative and really fun. And after they gave him Ritalin, like he was just like a zombie, like a hollow shell of his former self. And I'm like, okay, yeah,
Yep.
fine. He can focus in class now and do your little chores, but that's not my friend anymore, you know?
Right.
And so that kind of thing, like I'm a more, I'm more lean more towards therapeutic solutions and not medicational solutions. I think
Mhm.
there's a place for both, but it seems like oftentimes everybody goes the easy way, just like, oh, just, here's a prescription, just take those things, and off you go. Like, okay, there's better ways of solving things. But anyway, what I was getting at um, is like, I wonder if this kind of emergence of autism and ADHD and stuff like that. I mean, clearly some of it comes down to like improved diagnostic
Yeah.
techniques, but the behaviors that I see are new as far as I've seen, like widespread and new. And I wonder if this is a product, like it's almost like a compensation for our world at the way it is, with how much
Mhm.
information there is, how much noise there is, like, constantly just engaged with technology all the time. You've got these fast-paced videos and like loud things, and everything's crazy. Just, you're never alone with yourself. And
Yeah.
I wonder if that creates like this kind of outcome. If people developing minds who are exposed to all this. I mean, often, like, I know a lot of people who their parenting style was give the kid an iPad and walk away.
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
what do you think is going to happen to that kid? Like, that can't be good. And I
Yeah.
mean, it might be a response to that kind of upbringing, to kind of, whether it be like a way of compensating for it, or whether it be like almost like a bee sting, right? Like you're reacting to it
Mhm.
involuntarily or something. But
Well,
it makes me wonder.
yeah, I mean, yeah, I, I definitely think I wouldn't have noticed it in myself so much if it weren't for the way the world is today.
Mhm.
But uh, when my parents died and I was going through all the old stuff, I came across, all the notes that they took on me in Montessori, and
Ooh,
and
famous.
I was like, oh yeah, that sounds like an autistic kid. Like,
Yeah.
can't pay attention, like
Well,
likes to
but
be
yeah,
alone,
okay.
blah blah
What
blah.
about this? Wait, here, that made me think. What if we've always had autistic people? Always, like it's
Oh
always
yeah,
been a thing, but it doesn't really. It's not like activated as much until now. Now that we're assailed with constant
hmm
information, and like, because I went camping with a girlfriend a while back, and there were these teenagers that were across the way, and like high school students, like a whole bunch of them, and like they were playing music, but they played like 30 seconds and then skipped to the next song and played 30 seconds of that. They never finished a whole song. And it's like, that's the world we live in, where you can't even sit for like 1 minute without doing something, without like a screen in front of you, without something happening. Like, that wasn't the way when I was young. I remember just sitting out in the yard by myself and just kind of looking at the clouds, and sitting in my room just thinking, just
yeah,
daydreaming and stuff. And we don't do that. People do that, but there's so many ways of avoiding doing that, that like I think it's kind of screwing with people's development. And maybe that's like the thing. It's like, okay, we've always had autism, but it was never really an issue until this world gave it like fertile ground to flourish in,
yeah.
perhaps.
Now there is. I haven't followed this super closely, but there was some evidence, like actual evidence, not like Etienne evidence,
Sure.
that Tylenol use during pregnancy may have a correlation with autistic children.
Mm.
Now,
That
that doesn't mean it's like a 1-to-1 ratio. It may just be creating a situation in development where sensory input is not handled as efficiently.
that was
And
another aspect of the environment that I was going to get at. Like,
yeah.
we have different exposures nowadays to different
Mm-hmm.
chemicals and things like that. I mean, we've seen it. This is a known thing. I mean, my mom even was like really into this stuff, like, oh, things that have that kind of packaging because it leaches this chemical, or, oh, you don't eat that stuff because it's got this thing in it. And she had all this research stuff showing evidence that, oh yeah, exposure to this chemical or that chemical during development can cause problems. And we know that's a thing that does happen.
Yeah.
And sure, we've eliminated some of those things, but there are other things that weren't present before. So it's like, maybe it's like a perfect storm. Maybe Tylenol on its own isn't the culprit, but maybe Tylenol combined with an upbringing full of like flashing information just coming at you nonstop, maybe that triggers something, right?
Yeah, who
Or
knows?
it's hard to say, but that's what I kind of feel like. It feels a lot like that might be going on somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, I know people like, I mean, people who get exposed to certain, like the adults who have said, yeah, I was like totally chill. And then uh now I got onto TikTok and I can't fucking stop. And I can't even sit still now. I like can't collect my thoughts. Because it's like you gotta constantly be like scrolling or something, swiping and stuff. And you can't sit with your thoughts for very long. And like that, so it's like even if adults suffer that, I mean, imagine kids like growing up from babies immersed in that world, because it is new. Like we haven't had that until pretty recently.
Yeah.
Just a couple generations of that kind of exposure. I mean, the most electronic toy that I had when I was a kid was a speak and spell, you know? Like, oh yeah, that was the computer thing and stuff. And I think we had an Atari or something like that, but it's like that was it. And information,
Yeah.
you'd call your friends and talk to them on the phone, and you'd send a letter or you'd read a book.
I mean, we've got precedents for a phenomenon like this with PTSD.
yeah,
After a trauma, somebody is irrevocably changed. So why not have a sensory overload stress disorder
yeah,
that results in what we have come to call autism or
mm-hmm.
ADHD, or often those two kind of blend. And
I
I think
think they're two
I
sides of
think
the same coin.
yeah, I think
Honestly,
it's going to be swallowed up by that whole spectrum before too
mm-hmm.
long. When you see the Venn diagram, it's like
Mm-hmm.
watching the eclipse. Um,
Yeah. I
so like, yeah, like that's a good observation. Like the more technology, the more noise, the more population, the more flashy, showy. Hey, look at this. Hey, now look over here. You can't like the brain is a computer,
yes.
and if you feed too much into a computer, it's going to overheat and it's going to slow down
It,
and it's going to freak
well,
out.
or it may just kind of like shut out the noise, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, it's too much, and just kind of go into power save mode or something like that.
Yeah.
The thing is, I notice too, like, because I'm big into filmmaking and stuff and that kind of thing, and I've noticed too a trend in movies, and fairly probably in the last, I don't know, 10 years or so. So, um, but I see movies more and more, like the big budget movies and stuff. They don't even take 1 second to pause. It's just going from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. No, they don't, like it just cuts and it shaky cams everywhere. And like, there's
Mm-hmm.
always got to be something happening. And that was not always the case. Like movies, if you go back and look at movies from the 80s, they would take time to kind of let you absorb maybe the scene you had seen before, or
Yeah.
maybe set the stage for the next scene. There were quiet times, there were times long shots, there were times where nothing was happening. Dialogue might be kind of slow paced or something. Um, but
Painting with the empty space,
yeah.
basically.
Well,
Yeah.
it's like music, right? A rest is one of the most important musical notes that there is.
Mm-hmm.
Like the
Mm-hmm.
pause, it's very, very important. And
Yeah. Listener fatigue.
well, and with all this technology, think about it too. Everybody's got at least a TV and a computer and a tablet and a phone, like a cell phone, and probably more than one, and oftentimes they're all on at the same time doing something.
Right.
And it like that that can't
Humans
be
cannot
good.
multitask. It's
No.
it's actually not possible. The thing we're doing is making it, like we're MacGyvering it essentially by
Mhm.
relying on memory. We're
Well,
like, okay, I was just watching that. I'll come right back to it. Oh, wait, now this thing, I'll come back to that. And then
Mhm.
the thing before. And that's like uh it's using your back to lift instead of your legs, essentially.
Yeah. Well, so the human brain cannot multitask. It can task switch. And like
Mm-hmm.
you said, it relies on storing where we were, where what I was looking at a second ago, and now I look over here and then come back. And if you have too many of those, especially if you're doing that when there's other things around you going on, it it can be overwhelming. And I mean, even just in an hour or something of trying to get something done, but imagine growing up like that. You have a phone. Every kid now has a phone, so they're connected constantly. And we know how things are, like TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, whatever the next big thing is. They craft these algorithms to keep you watching, to keep you
Yeah.
engaged, and it's sneaky, it's sly, and it's kind of devious when it comes to adults, but I would almost say it's like practically criminal when you're dealing with kids. If you're pushing that on kids, like their brains are wiring themselves permanently, like the foundational wiring of their cognitive capability is being made at that moment. So the environment they're in is critical for how that is going to grow.
Yeah.
And it, I, you also, I mean, I think this might be maybe we're on to something here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a movement now towards disconnecting. Like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, no apps, no nothing. Simple things like typewriters, dude. I just saw I wish I could find it, but I saw a video from like a news organization in some city. But I guess like this high school has like a typewriter club now, and the kids are typing on actual typewriters because they're like, yeah, I can focus because all you have is the paper and the typewriter and the keys. There's nothing
Yeah.
else, and like they're using a mechanical device, and it was so amazing seeing these kids. It's like, dude, but and the dumb phone too. There's a lot of people
Yeah.
trying to, because it's like it's not healthy for a mind. You can't focus in
I
that
did
kind
the
of
dumb
world.
phone thing when I was in college,
Mhm.
like 10 years ago. I was like, okay, I got to get rid of my smartphone for this last year, or I'm
Mhm.
not going to do very well at all.
Yeah.
And it like my grades went up like a whole letter and a half, basically.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's all about this switching crap. Like,
Hmm.
like I used to think I had more RAM than a field of sheep. But it's just not enough now.
Hmm.
There's too much uh, input that is like undeniably interesting,
Hmm.
and constantly, like almost every day, I'm like, shit, I totally forgot what it was I wanted to read about, but I really wanted to read about it, and then I like got distracted by something else, and all I can remember now is that it was super cool, and I forgot what it was,
Oh, I
and
hate that.
and it's like the worst feeling ever.
Hmm. Well, and that actually, it is this that too is connected to what we're talking about, like the fact that we have access to instant answers for everything. You know, everybody's got Google in their pocket or whatever you want to use. Like you can search for things and find an answer just like that. So you don't have to. It's even things that you used to know or should know, right? You knew this, and you
Mm-hmm.
were like, "Wow, what was the name of that band that did that song?" And I remember the last time I was at Sherry's with a big group of people, there was somebody was pondering that exact question, like that one song, and it was something, and they were trying to like piece together that, and everybody was contributing, and someone busts out their phone, and they're like, "Oh, I'll just look it up," and I'm like, "No, no, 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 that's gonna kill us. That's gonna destroy our ability to remember." And we need to, like, it's the effort of recalling that trains your brain to remember things and to store
Mm-hmm.
things and stuff. And like
Yeah.
we're forfeiting that when we defer to these tools to just insta answer things. And
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 phones are so good at that now. Like
yes.
I have that app Shazam where it listens and tells
Mhm.
you what the song is. And we were sitting out on the balcony a couple weeks ago, and there was a nearby house having a party, and they were just singing a bunch of songs, like 30 people singing the same song and like all out of key and everything. And my wife was like, "Oh, this one sounds familiar. I can't remember who it is." So I just held up my phone. And I was like, "Shh, everybody be quiet." And it in like 2 seconds, it picked up the song from
Mhm.
it wasn't actually playing. They were just singing.
It wasn't on the radio. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's crazy. Well, and this is where AI is a useful thing, and this is where I think we can go one of two ways. We can simplify our lives and reduce noise, and AI can actually do that too. Um, but we can also go too. We could go deeper into this quagmire of noise and nonsense and no patience. That's another thing too. I remember the days of the BBS, right? Like running on a 2400 baud modem in text mode and stuff, and it was super slow. And I would spend hours and hours and hours looking for things and downloading things and sending messages through FidoNet and stuff. And like, but patience, right? I never felt like I was in a hurry or like, come on, come on. Like, I never felt like that. But now, with how fast things are, how responsive they are, yeah, if you click on something and something doesn't happen in like immediately, you're like, what's going on? You know, like we're losing patience. We're losing our ability to remember things.
Yeah.
We're losing our ability to focus. And autism could be a product of that. ADHD and stuff, like all that. Like, and even if it isn't, we can definitely all agree. I think everybody can agree that that kind of environment doesn't yield good results, like for the human mind and our consciousness. Like, I don't think it's healthy. It's healthy to take time and be with yourself, to like
Mhm.
meditate, to daydream, to actually sit and just read a book, an actual book, and
Mhm.
in a place of silence, like be in silence for a while. That rejuvenates people. And I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
well, that also shows that being constantly immersed in noise is not good.
Hmm.
Like, it brings people down, and there's depression too. That's another thing. Like, all this interconnectivity, kids today are way more depressed than ever. And it's these algorithms essentially that feed people things that keep them active, keep them engaged, and a lot of it impacts them negatively. Like, oh, they feel bad about themselves and that kind of thing.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
not to say I don't want to come across as a luddite. I love technology. I mean, I love AI and stuff, but I think we got to be kind of careful about how we use this tool.
Yeah. It, it, hmm. Yeah. It's hard to figure out like how to make all these great advancements in technology without it like washing everything else out.
Yeah.
Um, and especially now with um, even the modes of entertainment are being adversely affected by the shift in technology. Like,
Mhm.
we went from TV to cable TV to DVRs, and then like
Streaming.
Netflix would mail you a DVD, and now Netflix streams, and then everyone else is like streaming. We got to get in on that, and then all of a sudden TV is like nothing,
Hmm.
and you have to pay for like 15 different services.
Yeah. Well, don't forget, like, one of the previous ones that was before TV, we had radio.
Hmm.
Actually, that's a good point. Remember radio shows?
Yeah.
Like, the whole family would sit around the radio and sit there and listen to an episode of The Shadow or something like that. Like,
Yeah, I some of my favorite memories were listening to Cairo on
Mhm.
AM radio Saturday nights and Sunday nights. They would play old
Yep.
radio shows like The Shadow and Green Hornet, and
Yeah.
comedy ones like The Jack Benny Show. And
Which see, radio shows are it's LeVar Burton, I guess, like books, like the whole, you can imagine a whole world in there. You don't have images. You're listening, and your brain is conjuring up the images, and that's
Mhm.
an exercise that's super helpful for imagination and creativity and stuff. Like I think that's people don't realize how important that is. Like doing that, it's so it, like it's so important for that. And
Mhm.
now we live in a world where nobody reads books, nobody listens to the radio, nobody has, especially radio shows. I mean, fuck, those kids could barely listen to 30 seconds of a song before skipping to the next one. You
Right.
know?
You know, speaking of that, like my wife today was just complaining about how modern movies are like a little too intense for her
Mhm.
sensitivities, and with radio shows, it can never be too intense because you are in charge of
Uh-huh.
creating the imagery, you know?
Yep, exactly.
Like, yeah, even if they describe something gruesome, you don't
Mhm.
have to picture it.
No, no, and exactly. And everybody, the interesting thing too is everybody's image is going to be different. Like
Hmm.
that's why I think when people when they make a book to movie kind of thing, people who have read the book bitch about stuff because it's like, well, that's not what it's supposed to look like,
Hmm.
and everybody bitches about it. Well, because yeah, everybody had built a whole different world, their own
Yeah,
little world.
I did a minute microscopy about that. The book is better.
Yep.
It's,
Nice.
yeah, like it really just depends. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes the movie is better.
Mm-hmm.
Like it really depends on the story. It depends on the
Yeah.
person imagining it.
And
You
they're
know,
better in different ways too. It's
yeah.
like, sometimes sitting and watching a movie is great. Sometimes sitting and reading a book is great.
Hmm.
And maybe even just sitting with yourself and making up a story in your head. Like people don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
It's sad. And yeah, like again, I don't know if it's co- connected with autism or anything like that, but it sure seems like it. And it's certainly not healthy for
Hmm.
society in so many different ways. Because we're losing, like I said, we're losing all these things that are integral to a smoothly functioning society and one's own ability to interact with that society.
Yeah.
Patience is one of those things. Like Jesus.
We should make our own radio shows.
Yeah,
Bring it back.
I like that idea. Yeah. It,
Because that like not only is that like good for everyday people, but it might be a nice thing for blind people because it's tailored to
sound
yeah,
like you're
like there is no gore in radio shows. There's no point, you
no,
know?
and the only way that you get across an image is either to describe it or suggest it through
Yeah.
sound. And
Hmm.
that's something too, or even just like Foley effects, like background noises happening, kind of conjure up a certain feeling of a scene. Like, and then your brain just fills in the details. Like, oh yeah, you hear glasses clinking and silverware dinging around and people mumbling. That's a restaurant. Like
Hmm.
there you go. And it's an art form crafting those things. And actually, speaking of Cairo, they don't do the nighttime stuff anymore, but they do like specials. So
Hmm.
It's a Wonderful Life every year. They'll do like a performance of that on the radio with all the people from the radio station,
Huh.
acting in it and stuff, and it's great. And it's like you get there's like funny moments where there's somebody makes a mistake and they have to recover from it, or they kind of flub something, and but like that's the charm of it. It's
Actually,
awesome.
back in the 90s, Cairo did have a half-hour segment that they made contemporarily. Like they were actually recording like an old style detective whodunit
Mm-hmm.
thriller sort of thing, and I forget what it was called, unfortunately, but that was actually really cool. Like it was, apart from sound quality, you wouldn't be able to tell that it was new.
Yeah.
Like it sounded just like the old style, and
You know,
that's exactly how it should be. You know?
we need more of that, honestly. We
Yeah.
definitely need, and I mean, I'm glad that there's podcasts, because that kind of is similar, that long form where people sit and listen to something for like 2 hours at a time.
Mm.
That's a good thing that we have that, but we also need imagination things too. These old radio show kind of things to come. I wonder, what if you took a bunch of people who have autism, and sat them down in front of a radio, like even set the stage, give it an old wooden radio that's all crackly, and like played an old radio show, well, like multiple times. Like what would that,
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if that would kind of improve things, maybe. Or ADHD in particular too, like that kind of thing, like the ability to
Yeah.
focus, because
Yeah.
you do have to pay attention. You can't
Oh yeah.
wander
I
off in the middle of it.
I would always lay down and turn the lights off and listen in the dark.
Yep.
Just kind of close my eyes and watch the movie in my head,
Yeah.
basically. Um,
Wasn't there?
and
Wait, there was a speak. It was like a Star Trek. What was the one? Oh God, I can't remember the name of the guy, but it was some kind of thing, like this device that he had constructed that they were going to send into a star to create some kind of chain reaction. And it also, the other story that was parallel with that were like these nanites that got angry because Dr. Stubbs, that was the guy, and he killed a bunch of them, and they got angry, and they like tried to get back at him and stuff, and eventually he reconciled with them, and they helped his project and stuff. But like in that show, he was talking about how he would replay in his head all these great baseball games.
oh yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
and like, because he just knew the stats, but he would like imagine the game actually playing out based on all this information.
That was an autistic guy. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's so cool.
Yeah, I remember that now. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I got to go back and watch some Star Trek.
I know, it's so good. Well, and go back and listen to some radio shows. Like
Mm-hmm.
I think I have probably like 30 or 40 of them as MP3s.
I have some DVDs. My dad made a bunch of DVDs of the radio shows and
Nice.
stuff because we would tape them off the radio sometimes
Mm-hmm.
and then transfer them to CD or whatever.
Well, and here's the cool thing about those radio shows. They're timeless. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't matter, because you can go back and watch a movie from the 40s and you're like, oh, well, that's black and white. And you try to show it to kids today and you're like, where's the color? And then it's something from the 70s, like, what the hell is that and stuff. But the radio shows, they would imagine a contemporary world and,
Mhm.
and encapsulate the story within it. So it's like it's timeless.
Yeah.
There needs to be more on the radio, because there's something about sitting down deliberately in front of a radio, like a device that just does that one thing. It just receives a signal and turns it into sound, and hear a story, an amazing tale told, and use your imagination. Radio, I still love radio. I mean, well, I have behind me radios. I have really old tube radio and much newer shortwave radios and stuff, and that's great too, because you can like scour around through various frequencies and trying to hear things, like find different transmissions or broadcasts from around the world. Like every once in a while, I've come across a numbers station. Those are really interesting. That's a little conspiracy theory thing that we could go into sometime. But like it's sort of like you never know what you're going to get. It's a little bit like going into a Goodwill. You know, it could be anything, but there are regular transmissions. But then there's also random stuff, like somebody talking to somebody else and stuff. It's like, yeah, it's awesome.
And dial into the porn channel.
Yeah, yeah, that's all you get. Just like that's all it would be. Like, okay, well, oh man, but yeah, I think technology is great. It gives us so many things, and the ability to communicate with anyone, anywhere, immediately, like we are right now,
Hmm.
the other side of planet Earth. It's pretty awesome. And GPS, that goes into this lost ability. Um, these are all good things. Like they're certainly beneficial. They've changed the world. The internet, even YouTube. It's like it's changed the world. AI will definitely change the world, but we got to be cautious of how we employ it. And I think handing something, a distraction to kids that is tailor made to keep them engaged for as long as possible is probably not a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that. I think that's setting a precedent too early on that's harmful.
Yeah.
Oh, I was going to say about GPS too. I have several friends that no longer know how to navigate because they use GPS exclusively. Like they cannot find their way to a place they've been many times unless they're using GPS. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Like I actively avoid GPS unless it's like important. Like okay, I got to be here, and I don't know where I'm going, or I get lost and I got to find my way back. But to me, it's like the art of navigation is something we should not lose. We should not give that
Yeah.
up.
It's definitely helpful in Europe, just because of the antiquated road systems that
Mhm.
aren't really made for the modern day, and it's easy to get lost. But
And you're in
I
a very
still
unfamiliar area too. So
I still at least go out sometimes and just drive around and get lost and
mhm.
try to figure out where I am just by seeing familiar things
Yeah.
and creating that map in my head, because that's one thing I was very, very good at back in the Tacoma, Seattle area is especially after I worked for the newspaper and ran all those different routes
Mhm.
across the entire Puget Sound, I
Mhm.
could get around in pretty much every city.
Yeah.
Um, and almost never get lost. So like that is
In
a
fact,
cool skill to have.
absolutely. Well, and if for some reason that system doesn't work, well, people who are totally dependent on those systems would be fucked. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
And
having that backup.
we never had GPS back in the day when I worked that job.
No,
I think
no,
it was
it's
just coming out, but we didn't have it
yep.
in our vans or
Well,
anything.
GPS had been around for a long time, but not specific like road navigation systems. That kind of
Yeah.
started in like the mid 2000s ish, kind of became more and more commonplace.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't cheap too. Now, of course, it's free, um,
Yeah.
basically. But I think it's important to get lost sometimes. Like, and that's
Mm-hmm.
part of the whole sitting and being with yourself and daydreaming thing. Like, just get lost, go somewhere and end up somewhere you didn't intend to go. Doing that around Tacoma, it's like now I know alternate routes around everything. Like I know where every road goes. Like, okay, if something's going on, I can get to this point by going around that. Cause like GPS isn't going to know that there's construction necessarily. They're not going to know there's an accident somewhere necessarily. Or the best route. And so, yeah, that's kind of nice. Like
Yeah.
developing that ability, it's great. And it exercises your mind too. Like that's important to do.
Yeah.
Challenge yourself and stuff.
There's a great song by Fame Riot called Get Lost. And they're actually a local Tacoma band, like electronic band, a couple brothers. I don't know if they're still doing it, but they were super good. They're on Spotify, so look it up. Fame Riot, Get Lost.
Right on.
That's my recommendation musically. Apart from the song you might hear coming in on the wind right now, which is not the Fame Riot. It's ALTAiR.
It's us. Yes, definitely. Well, so we've been down a whole bunch of different directions here, but I'm curious what other people have to say about this. Like, do you agree or disagree? Alternative theories, maybe? Um, well, talking about technology in general and its influence on our minds, or autism, ADHD, that kind of thing. I know lots of people feel strongly about it and they have their ideas. So I put them down there in the comment section. Just avoid talking about vaccines, please. We've been through that already.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
get our video taken down.
I know. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, we'll eventually have the one that we did up on Rumble or something like that. So, so people can refer to that if they are going down that road. So yeah,
I think the podcast version might still be on Spotify. I'll have to look at that.
All right. Well, yeah. So
yeah. All right. Well,
sticking around.
Yes. Thanks for deep sink diving into autism and ADHD and technology and random access memory.
Control Delete would be a good outro tune there, actually. Oh, yep. Well, tune in next time. Same bat time, same bat channel, right? Speaking of like radio shows and stuff, like I think Batman was one of them, if I remember correctly. Yeah. Man, yeah, we should do a radio show. We should do at least one. So tune in for that one. All right. Take it easy, everybody. See you later.